proudly used it ever since then. But tell me, when I use it, I'm supposed to pay off my bills every month. At least that's the card that I have.
Right.
What percentage of people actually do pay off their bills every month?
Well, I can't give you the exact percentage, but it is a very good percentage that pay their bill.
So how do you make money? You charge a fee to somebody annually, an annual fee.
Yes.
And then you get a fee from the merchant, is that right? And
that's right.
The essence of the credit card business. The other cards, I won't mention them, but your competitors, they seem to make money off the interest charges. Is that a different business, really?
No, in fact, what's very important, David, is providing customers with choice. So you're absolutely right that we make money from a portion of the purchase that you make at a establishment. There's an annual fee that varies based on the type of card that you carry. And then also we charge interest on outstanding balances. So we do offer revolving credit cards. Okay. What's different in our model is that net interest income is around 18 to 20% of our revenues. For a bank card, that's 60 to 80%.
The credit card is still the bulk of your earnings or revenue?
Yes.
Amedeo Modigliani's Nu Couché, or reclining nude, was a top prize that went for top dollar.
I read recently that somebody bought a $175 million work of art, and he charged that entire work of art to the American Express card. You have to clear that in advance?
I can't acknowledge whether that took place or not from a privacy standpoint. What I will say
Suppose
is
I wanted
that,
to buy a $175 million work of art.
David, if you want to buy that, I am sure you'll be approved. And if you would like to talk after this interview about any other purchases,
okay,
we'll have that conversation.
Okay. So have you ever used your American Express card and had it turned down?
That has never happened to me.
Really?
When I took over the card business in the early 90s, we did have a policy for top management that they had an automatic override. And I thought that was absurd because I wanted our top executives to have the experience that every customer had. And so we did have some executives that were declined for purchase.
So let's suppose sometimes you go to buy something at a place and it says, you put down your American Express card and say, we don't take American Express. I'm sure that you don't like when you hear that. But when
I don't.
I know you don't like it, and you probably can argue with them, but what do? Do you walk out, or do you say, I have another card, and what is your other card that you might use?
I don't have another card.
You don't have another card?
I do not have another card. I only use American Express cards.
But what happens when you go to a place that says, we don't take American Express? You just walk out?
I walk out because there are alternatives. I mean, the reality is that we can meet the vast spending needs of our customers. There are other options that I have, and it certainly is in my interest to take advantage of those options.
Does your wife, is she allowed to have a Visa or MasterCard, or your children? They can't have one either?
Well, I think you know my wife is very independent.
Okay.
She has decided on her own that she only carries our products.
Okay.
Now, what's very, very important is I study the competition intensively. We do have people in the company who have other cards, who test them, who use them, so we can find out what's happening in the marketplace. And I think that's very important.
Your largest shareholder, I think, is Warren Buffett. Does he call you up every day and say, here's what you should do to increase the value of my stock, or does he leave you alone?
He is not someone who is on your case of how's the stock price doing every day. He's very focused on making sure you have a unique and differentiated business model.
Otra vez vuelve a ser el tema, ¿no? El Tratado de Libre Comercio para América del Norte. ¿Qué queremos?
Para nosotros hay 4 pilares fundamentales.
¿Qué te haría levantarte de la mesa?
Levantarme de la mesa son medidas claras de restricción al comercio.
Por cierto, ¿tú por qué no has querido presentar tu declaración de conflicto de intereses?
Yo, perdón, pues sí.
Porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
Today, going forward, what do you think the biggest challenge for American Express is? I mean, obviously the world is changing a bit. There's new ways of payment. There's PayPal, Apple Pay, and Square and other things. What are the big challenges that you have?
I think what's really exciting, what's happening in the marketplace right now, is the convergence of online and offline. And obviously technology is having a major impact. Mobile is having a major impact. Form factors are changing. So 10 years from now, I don't know if plastic will be used at the same level, but I frankly don't care, because it really is the unique business model that American Express has, the services that we have. Over the last 10 years, I've spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, and one of the things that I do when I go to Silicon Valley is I take those companies through our business model. And a number of those companies want to partner with us because what they say is American Express has this integrated business model, unlike other participants in payments. And so that's why we have a very good partnership with Uber, with Airbnb, with Facebook. We obviously are involved with Apple Pay, with Samsung Pay, with Android Pay. But what's very important is not to look at payments as simply facilitating a payment, is to also look at payments as a platform to deliver services.
Your largest shareholder, I think, is Warren Buffett. Does he call you up every day and say, here's what you should do to increase the value of my stock, or does he leave you alone?
I've been really privileged to have Warren Buffett as an investor. He's been a very strong supporter of the company, a very strong supporter of me. He is not someone who is on your case of how's the stock price doing every day. What he's focused on is what are you doing for sustainable success? Right. What are you doing to differentiate your products and services? Because he's very focused on making sure you have a unique and differentiated business model. But I have enjoyed my interactions with him. I call him, and
hard to get him on the phone,
he also
or?
calls me. He is so easy to get on the phone.
Right.
His character and the type of person that he is inspires me to want to do better for the company.
So do you believe that leaders are born, or are they made, or how do people become great leaders?
I think it's a combination of both. I draw the analogy to great athletes. I mean, there's some great athletes that are born, but unless you practice your craft, those skills will dissipate. And so there's certainly people who have innate leadership capabilities, but I'm a strong believer that you have to look at leadership as a craft.
Today, as an African-American leader of this company, you're obviously a visible symbol of African-American leadership in the business world. But when you ultimately decide to do something different, are there other diverse leaders in this company that you've been able to recruit? Do you have a lot of other African-American leaders, women, other people of different ethnic backgrounds? How have you been able to do that?
Yeah, I think what we've been very, very focused on is diversity. And we have a cadre of people around the world that I think can move up in this company, and I think that's important.
Outside of American Express, you have been very involved in some philanthropic things. One that I am very familiar with as well is the African American History and Culture Museum, where you've been the leader in trying to get Americans to contribute to that, and very successfully. You've gotten, I think, over $300 million now has been contributed as a result of your efforts. How did you manage to convince people to give over $300 million to that cause?
Well, first let me thank you, David, because you've been one of those contributors and you've made a big difference not only to the museum but the Smithsonian overall.
Well, you were very persuasive.
It will celebrate great achievements against great odds. It will remind us of the power of dreams and faith. What was critical in the beginning was to emphasize to people that this was not just a museum for black people.
I imagine holding a little hand to somebody and tell them the stories that are enshrined here. And together we'll learn about ourselves as Americans. We'll walk away that much more in love with this country.
this is a museum for America. And what people are seeing is America through the lens of the African American experience. But what they're also seeing is this museum really represents the values of this country.
When you do decide to leave American Express, what would you like people to say is your legacy?
What I'd like people to say, first and foremost, because I believe this is important for any leader, is that Ken Chenault is a person with high integrity. Ken Chenault is a change agent. He's focused on innovation. He has developed people, and he has left the company stronger and positioned the company for sustained success.
Do you ever leave home without your American Express card?
I absolutely never leave home without it, and when I'm at home, it's always with me.
Bloomberg Business Week, ahora en México. No te pierdas el programa con el detrás de cámara de los reportajes y entrevistas publicados por la revista más influyente en los negocios. Bloomberg Business Week, sábado, 8 de la noche. Porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
Una sustancia química está transformando el narcotráfico. Es el fentanilo, que ha ganado terreno en Estados Unidos, donde se consume solo o mezclado con heroína. Producir un kilo cuesta menos de $2,000, pero ese kilo se puede transformar en 1 millón de pastillas que se venden hasta en $20 cada una. Es decir, ese kilo puede generar en el más alto escenario $20 millones. Un ejemplo, en 2015, agentes federales decomisaron 44 kilos en Sinaloa y Baja California. A precio de calle, tomando una cifra baja, esos 44 kilos se hubieran vendido en 1.500 millones de pesos, el salario anual de 12,000 soldados mexicanos. Sería difícil encontrar otro negocio tan lucrativo, legal o ilegal, en el mundo. Y sus efectos son devastadores. Para manejar el fentanilo se requiere equipo especial. En mayo de 2015, agentes chinos decomisaron 46 kilos. 6 oficiales entraron en coma tras tocar la droga sin equipo de protección. El contacto directo con de 2 a 3 miligramos de fentanilo puede generar paro respiratorio y posiblemente la muerte, de acuerdo con la DEA. Estados Unidos vive una epidemia de muertes por consumo de opiáceos que satura las morgues a lo largo del país.
He got his start at Microsoft as employee number 30, personally recruited and hired by co-founder Bill Gates. In over 3 decades, he went from Gates' top lieutenant to Microsoft CEO, and is perhaps best known for bringing life to software conferences that will never be seen again. In 2014, Steve Ballmer left Microsoft after a 14-year reign, bringing his trademark energy and enthusiasm from the boardroom to the basketball court with a $2 billion deal to buy the LA Clippers. Joining me today on Bloomberg Studio 1.0, Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft, Ballmer Group co-founder and owner of the LA Clippers. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Emily.
So I heard a rumor about you that I couldn't possibly believe to be true, which was that you were shy growing up.
That's a true rumor.
That's true.
That is absolutely a true rumor.
So tell me about this.
When I was a little kid, you know, if somebody's dad was at home, if I didn't know the people, I mean, literally, I'd sit out in the car sometimes because I'd be so nervous and so shy. When I got to college, a friend of mine, he describes it this way: "Hi, I'm Steve Ballmer. My hand is sweaty because I'm so nervous to meet you. So I guess you could say over time that's changed.
So it has changed quite considerably. I mean, you brought life to software conferences that will never be seen again. So where did that guy come from?
That's a very good question. I would say there was a breakthrough for me, literally. I believe this when I was football manager at Harvard. And that's a very intimidating thing to get up in front of 100 football players. Manager's not the loftiest position. And you know, hey, listen up a minute. And you have to speak before a pretty unruly group of 100 guys. And that's where I kind of broke through.
So you were born in Detroit. Your dad worked at Ford. You excelled in math and science, even early on. And then at Harvard, some other kid named Bill Gates apparently lived down the hall.
That's correct.
Right? And you were better at math than him.
I think that's an extreme way to say it. On the Putnam Prize competition, which was kind of the big college math competition, I did beat him our sophomore year.
So how did you get to know Bill? What was your relationship like in school?
We got to know each other, ate lunch and dinner some, took a math class together, and brainstormed a little bit about what he was doing when he started Microsoft. About a year after the company moved to Seattle, Bill called up. I was at Stanford Business School, and hey, we could really use a guy like you, blah, blah, blah.
So you joined Microsoft in 1980.
Yep.
You were the 30th employee. And wasn't there a time during those first few weeks where you were thinking, I don't know if this place is for me, maybe I should quit?
Bill and I were arguing. I wanted to add a bunch of people. Bill didn't want to add them. He said to me, Steve, you're going to bankrupt this place. And so I thought, well, why did I drop out of school? And Bill and his dad did take me out, and that's where at least I make up in my head. Bill invented this computer on every desk and in every home. He said something like, Steve, you don't get it. We're going to put a computer on every desk and in every home. And I bought into it and stayed a total of almost 34 years. You were his top lieutenant, right? And then you became CEO in 2000. You tripled Microsoft's revenue. What was it like taking over from a founder CEO? People like to focus in on Bill was CEO, you were CEO. This was kind of like my baby and Bill's baby, and we were growing it and nurturing it. He was kind of like the senior partner. I was the junior partner. If it's in the raising of children, I would say he was more, mom gets to decide more than dad. But, so I take great satisfaction in the things we accomplished throughout the time, not just when I became CEO. When I became CEO, we had a very miserable year. Bill didn't know how to work for anybody, and I didn't know how to manage Bill. I'm not sure I ever learned the latter. Things lightened up some, and then I would say my life changed a lot in 2008 when Bill actually left the company.
How so?
At that, Bill had asked me, he said, look, I'm happy to help you anyway, but I don't want you to need me, so I can come and go if you want me, great, but I have another life. And in a sense, I finally felt like, okay, we're not partners anymore. I have to take accountability. And I think I probably did some of my very best work at the company after Bill left, actually. Really? Like what? Pushed us into Bing, sustained that investment. That's really where we got into the cloud. We started what's now Office 365 in Azure after Bill left. We pushed into the hardware business with Surface, et cetera. And now Satya Nadella, my successor, is sort of taking things there to infinity and beyond, if you will. How do you feel about being asked about your successes and your failures? What you're most proud of? What you're least proud of? At this stage, I'm almost 3 years out. It's ancient history. Did I, have a lot of success? Yeah. Are there some things I wish I'd done differently? Of course. I started a company that had about $2.5 million of revenue and 30 people, and I left a company that had $22 billion in profit, and I feel like that net, pretty good success. What's your relationship with Bill like today? Yeah, we've kind of drifted apart. He's got his life, I sort of have mine. Microsoft was kind of the thing that really bound us. We started off as friends, but then really got quite enmeshed around Microsoft, and since I've gone, we really have drifted a little bit. He wasn't happy about when you left suddenly, or, what really happened? Well, I mean, it was definitely not a simple thing for either one of us. I think that at the end of the day, there are probably two things. A little bit of a difference in opinion on the strategic direction of the company, which I think is a challenge. And then number two, he and I had kind of always had what I would call a brotherly relationship in the good parts and the bad parts. And I just think towards the end that was a bit more difficult than not, particularly with the strategic direction change, and the stock price wasn't going anywhere, so the rest of the board felt pressure, despite the fact that profits were going up. So I think you had kind of a combustible situation. And
does it ever bother you you don't get credit for that?
Sure and no. I mean, at the end of the day, I have the great sort of comfort of knowing what I did and feeling good about myself, and everything else doesn't really matter.
Where did you want to take the company? Where did he want to take the company?
I think there was a fundamental disagreement about how important it was to be in the hardware business. I had pushed Surface. The board had been a little reluctant in supporting it, and then things came to a climax around what to do about the phone business.
Satya Nadella was on stage recently where he said missing the mobile phone was one of the biggest mistakes in Microsoft's history. What would you have done differently?
I would have moved into the hardware business faster and recognized that what we had in the PC, where there was a separation of chips, systems, and software, wasn't largely going to reproduce itself in the mobile world. I wish I'd thought about the model of subsidizing phones through the operators. People like to point to this quote where I said iPhones will never sell. It was because the price of $600 or $700 was too high, and there was business model innovation by Apple to get it essentially built into the monthly cell phone bill. We should have been in the hardware business sooner in the phone case, and we were still suffering what I would call some of the effects of our Vista release of Windows, which sucked up a huge amount of resource for a much longer period of time than it should have, because we stumbled over it. And when you have a lot of your best engineers sort of in a sense being non-productive for a while, it really takes a toll.
Would you have bought Nokia?
I certainly wanted to buy Nokia. The board at first disagreed with that, and then came back and said the company should go ahead, even though I had decided to leave. I think it was, if executed in a certain way, I think it made a lot of sense. Company chose to go another direction, and that's the decision the company made.
Do you think they're wrong?
I see the stock price flying sky high, and all you can say is that the market certainly agrees with the direction Satya's taking the company, and I'm super excited about that.
How do you think Satya's doing?
I think he's doing a fantastic job. He's really pushed on the cloud. He's really building on the foundation of machine learning and artificial intelligence. I consider the fact that revenues and profits have not been down. They've been pretty flat, actually. But that's important to maintain as he re-gears the place. He has my certainly unconditional support.
He's been more open to partnerships than you seem to be. Is that the right strategy?
No, I have no quibbles with anything he's done from an call it an openness standpoint. I think that's a better way of saying it. Should Azure run open source software? Absolutely. Is it easier for Satya to communicate that than it ever would have been me because I was identified as a competitor? Sure, and he's taking advantage of it, and he's doing the right stuff.
How does life as the owner of a basketball team compare to life at Microsoft?
Desde Nueva York y Londres, infórmate del cierre de los mercados europeos y su repercusión en el mundo. Bloomberg Markets European Close. Lunes a viernes, 10 de la mañana. Porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
May 2014, you bought the Clippers for $2 billion. How does life as the owner of a basketball team compare to life at Microsoft?
Well, it's completely different. So comparing them may not be the most interesting or valuable thing to do. I love the game. I love seeing us go out there and win. But there's aspects to the job as well. How do I, sort of properly interact with our coach, with our basketball staff, with our players? What's my role? We have big decisions in front of us. An arena. Where do we go in terms of changing the way sports is consumed using digital techniques? Not just OTT, but virtual reality and live statistics. In addition to, hey, it's the season, let's go win some ball games.
So, what are your hopes for a new season? And not to talk smack, but how can you beat the Warriors this year?
I don't know, I watched the Spurs beat the Warriors by 25 points in their opening game. It's kind of like what we say, anybody can beat anybody on any given night.
That said, the Cavs and the Warriors are still favored to get to the finals for the third year in a row.
Sure.
Does the league have a competitiveness problem, and do they need to fix it?
I think our league is actually pretty competitive over time. But in any given year, there are players who are difference makers. I think it is tougher to win it all if you don't have at least one and probably two of those difference makers.
How is the search for the new arena going?
We're searching. That's one of the things we'll take a look at before we're all done. First question is, what's out there for available land? What would it look like to build the building? We have some good confidence that we'll find land, that we can build a building at a good price. I am very interested in the building of an arena. But before all said and done, I'm sure we'll talk to the Staples guy. The other thing I can tell you is I don't think it ever makes sense to enter a renegotiation with a landlord unless you have an option.
Right.
So we will have an option, and it could be a very exciting one.
Let's talk about your class that you're teaching now, because you are drilling down on government.
Yeah, when I retired in early 14, my wife and I really, she's been working for 10 plus years on issues of child welfare and what does it take to help support children who grow up in tougher circumstances. I retired and she says, okay, now you're my partner. And I said, come on, the government takes care of that. All we have to do is pay our taxes correctly. And she said, no, we can do better than that. I've put 10 years in. And so we locked on two things. Number one, we locked in on a focus on kids who were born in communities where their probability of living the American dream, having that sense of upside, is very limited. But why the government project? Because my wife challenged me. I said, okay, I got to figure out really what government does. How much money does it take in? What does it put out? How is it working? And eventually came to the idea what we needed to do was to create something like a 10K or an investor presentation, if you will. We're hoping to publish early 2017.
What are the most troubling things you've found so far about the numbers?
Government is actually making good progress and good improvements in many ways. I was surprised how good I felt. Not perfect, but much better about government and the taxes. And I came away with two big things. Number one, what I call the savings programs, not the transfers and the entitlements, the savings programs, Social Security and Medicare. We have to put aside enough revenue and enough expense to match. Those things have lost money every year since 1980. Second thing we have to do consequently then, that'll help us get the debt under control. But the third thing, which really jives with what my wife said, is there are communities of people. Let's say you're born in the bottom 20%. If life was perfect, there'd be a 20% chance you stay in the bottom 20%. The truth is there are communities of people where that number's over 50%. Though that's just not okay. Every kid should at least have the opportunity. What does it take to, for government and for us as people with philanthropic and civic resources, what kinds of investments in not-for-profits and government programs? How does philanthropy partner with government? So it's been interesting, but when you look at government, a lot of things going well, but some things really not.
The work that you're doing with your wife in philanthropy has been compared to what Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan are doing with the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. Talk to me a little bit about where you're going, where you're leaning. who you're looking to help?
There's some great not-for-profits doing great work. We are trying to find the best of those who operate nationally and support them. That's number one. Number two, we are very bullish on what they call place-based strategies, where you bring a community together and you challenge everybody, the schools, everybody. Number three, we're going to focus in on certain cities. The ones we have connection to are Seattle, because we live there, LA, because we own a basketball team there, and Detroit, because I grew up there. So we will have geographic focus.
When you joined Microsoft, you didn't get a single share. Is that true?
Otra vez vuelve a ser el tema, ¿no? El Tratado de Libre Comercio para América del Norte. ¿Qué queremos?
Para nosotros hay 4 pilares fundamentales.
¿Qué te haría levantarte de la mesa?
Levantarme de la mesa son medidas claras de restricción al comercio.
Por cierto, ¿tú por qué no has querido presentar tu declaración de conflicto de intereses?
Yo, perdón, pues sí.
Porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
You mentioned you could never make the math work on Salesforce. Never, ever, ever, ever. What do you mean by that?
It's too expensive. I mean, it's a fine company. You know, is it a great company? I don't know. It's a fine company. But in my opinion, relative to earnings potential, it is dramatically overpriced. That's just my opinion.
Do you think they're headed for a disaster, or
the company's headed for a disaster? In my worldview, at some point in time, the market will ask companies to make profits commensurate with their market cap. Now, Amazon doesn't either. They have great potential. It's a great company, great company. When will the market demand that? Can't say. When will it demand it from Salesforce? Can't say.
Is Amazon getting a pass from Wall Street?
They are, because people, I think, believe powerfully enough in the future of earnings. But you can't tell me over the long run earnings and market cap are divorced. That sort of runs fundamental to my basic view in capitalism and the way it works.
We can talk about Twitter, because you're still an investor in Twitter,
Sure.
as I understand it. At the time, when you announced a stake, it was 4%. Do you still own as many shares in Twitter as you used to?
But I think it's fair to say I remain a large investor in Twitter.
So what do you think about what they're going through now?
First of all, I think Twitter is an irreproducible asset. I don't think there's any vehicle that lets you speak broadly to a mass audience any better than Twitter. Could the product be easier to use? Of course, the product could be easier to use, and I think that's an important area.
So do you see Twitter having a future as an independent company?
I think Twitter would be great as an independent company, and I'm sure there are acquisitions that would also make sense for the company, the product, and shareholders.
What about going private?
Going private is a distraction. In my opinion, I think the company would be better served to put its energy into innovation than all of the work it would take to go private.
What about Jack Dorsey having his 2 jobs? Do you think that's a good setup?
I think it's easy to question. People would obviously, including me, like more out of Twitter. CEO is clearly divided in the way Jack spends his time. Certainly as a shareholder, it would be reassuring to me if he was entirely focused on Twitter.
What would you like to see?
I'd like to see them work on the things they need to do from a product and cost structure standpoint and be open, always open to opportunities to be independent, but also to make a sale if that seems appropriate.
When you joined Microsoft, you didn't get a single share. Is that true?
Well, that's complicated. I had a profit share. I never had a stock option. It's written on Wikipedia. I made money on stock options, never had any. At the day we incorporated, I had 8 3/4% of the company, and that's been the source of my ownership since then.
And you still own a lot of the company today, something like 4%?
I still own what I own. That's not a thing that I disclose. And with the stock at 60, you just have to consider the possibilities, given how good a job Satya's done.
Bill Gates and Paul Allen have sold a bunch of their shares, but you've held on to yours, and you actually own more than them.
That's correct.
Why have you held on?
I believed in myself. I ran a company I believed in, and guess what? It's worth a bunch. It's worth a bunch. Now, the full recognition in the marketplace of the value of the profit stream we created wasn't necessarily recognized during my tenure, but it is now being recognized in Satya's tenure. I'd say, number one, I made a great investment by holding. And number two, I have a lot of loyalty. I mean, certainly when I'm working at the place, if I start selling, what does that mean? It means I don't believe in the future of the company. I sort of basically believe that people who are on boards or work for companies, at least in leadership positions, they should actually have to hold all their stock.
At what point do you think you might sell?
That'll be a decision I get to make. The longer I get out of the company, the more it's not mine anymore. The more I look at the value of the stock, the more we're doing philanthropically, which is a big deal. These things will change.
We've calculated you're worth $26 billion.
It's your calculation.
How do you manage your money? How do you manage your investments once you get to that level of wealth?
Well, I do it pretty simply. I own Microsoft, I own some Twitter, I own the Clippers, and I own a bunch of index funds.
Comparisons have been made to you and Tim Cook. Tim obviously also taking over from an iconic founder, CEO. What do you make of those comparisons?
I mean, if you write it down on a piece of paper, founder, product-oriented CEO replaced by non-founder, more business-oriented CEO, the comparison is perfect. If you say most of the revenue and profit of the company was generated under my watch, yes. Tim's watch, yes. So those things are true. I think people are trying to extrapolate that to, and during the tenure, the new product assets weren't built. Certainly in my own case, I'd say, hey, we got going in the cloud, we got started in hardware, and we really built our asset in machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we were building those assets. Apple's a lot more secretive. I can't tell you what assets Tim's building or not building. The jury's out. The jury's out on everything. But if the worst thing anybody ever says to me is I'm being compared to a guy who's done a great job at Apple, so be it.
We're on to your second act. What do you want to write in chapter 2 of Steve Ballmer?
I want to have fun and make a civic contribution. The work I'm trying to do to publish all this data, I call those civic contributions. I think some of the things we can do with the Clippers can be very important civically inside the Los Angeles area. I don't want to make this sound silly, but spectator sports by itself was not really my deal. I love watching my kids play, and the Clippers is sort of more similar. I know the guys, I care. I see myself as a very energetic guy, but also a very thoughtful guy, a guy who's come from being kind of shy and nerdy to a guy who's not. But the grounding part throughout that is ability to think through hard problems and hopefully make a difference.
Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft,
owner of the LA Clippers, thank you so much for being here on the show. It's been great to have you.
It's my pleasure.
Economía, cierre de bolsa, negocios, finanzas. Víctor Piz presenta lo más relevante de las noticias al sonar la campana. Con Víctor Piz, lunes a viernes, 3 de la tarde. Porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
One of the basic truths of the human condition is that people love to float. And there's no better place to float than here at the Dead Sea in Israel, where, without any effort at all, large mammals can achieve buoyancy. There's some ritual involved to doing this place the right way. Whoa. You need to fall into some mud, lather up, and then relax with a good read. Sorry to do that to your white shirt, Jack, you handsome devil. Israel has many wonderful sides, and this is one of its finest. Arabs, Jews, tourists, and TV hosts all come here. And can't help but float together for a while and laugh. It's unfettered, or at least less fettered, joy. It would be nice if this story could remain so simple, but it can't. To come to Israel is to witness the fierce tensions that loom over this country firsthand. Its spy balloons floating by highways, its walled-off and fenced-in Arab cities. And tourist spots turn quiet due to the stabbings and random acts of violence that have become so prevalent over the past 2 years. On this episode of Hello World, I'll dig into how the constant threat of war gave birth to the Israeli technology industry. And how Israel evolved into a technology giant, one with thousands upon thousands of cutting-edge startups. My journey will find me in Jerusalem, controlling an iPad with my eyes, at the Gaza Strip, checking out Iron Dome up close.
Everything you see here can be moved out in a matter of hours.
And in Nazareth, I'll meet with a man that wants to make sure no one gets left behind in Israel's race to innovate. Silicon Valley may be home to some of the biggest tech giants in the world, but it's being challenged like never before. Crazy tech geniuses have popped up all over the planet, making things that will blow your mind. My name is Ashley Vance. I'm an author and journalist, and I'm on a quest to find the most innovative tech creations and meet the beautiful freaks behind them.
Hello, world.
The Israeli military dominates much of this country's culture. At 18 years of age, men and women head off for 2 to 3 years of required service. Kids who would be trying to locate the best kegger or sleeping through class in the United States find themselves here dealing with the most intense of situations. These young soldiers in the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, also learn to use some of the most advanced military technology around. To see how the IDF has given Israel a unique tech edge, I decided to check it out up close. To see the Iron Dome. I've traveled to Ashkelon, a coastal city just south of Tel Aviv that nudges up against the Gaza Strip.
What we're seeing here right now is the launcher, which launcher has 20 missiles on it. You can see the red light flashing, which means it's armed and ready.
Here, one of the dozen or so Iron Dome batteries sits at the ready to intercept missiles and provide Israel with a type of shield from aerial attacks.
I'm the Iron Dome commander.
Lieutenant Colonel Liran Cohen oversees its operation.
Is this as close as we get, or do we get...
This is as close as we get.
It took just 3 years and about $200 million to develop this defense system. It relies on a radar that instantly detects when a missile has been fired. Algorithms quickly try to determine what type of projectile is in the air and whether it's heading for a populated or strategic area. If so, Iron Dome launches a missile of its own. It's said that Iron Dome has taken down more than 1,000 missiles since it turned on in 2011, with a 90% success rate. Some people question the accuracy of these figures. What's clear, though, is that the algorithms capable of directing projectiles while performing a cost-benefit analysis on human life are among the most advanced in the world. This network of launchers is highly mobile and constantly on the move. This site, like many, is temporary.
Everything you see here can be moved out in a matter of hours. And we move around a lot to make sure nobody knows where we are all the time.
Unless you live here, it's difficult to imagine just how much this technology has transformed the lives of ordinary Israelis.
I can tell you from my own personal experience, sitting in my own house and seeing rockets fired towards my house and operating this incredible system and succeeding. With the Iron Dome, when you see your house that you're protecting and your family and your friends and your soldiers, it's a sense of great sense of pride.
For many Palestinians, Iron Dome means something else. It's just the most visible part of an expansive Israeli security apparatus that includes drones, checkpoints, and espionage technology. Those tools have been put to immediate use in the West Bank, Gaza, and throughout Israel. Terrorist bombings have declined. Missiles have met their match. But lower tech forms of protest, like stabbings, are now on the rise. What's been remarkable is the speed at which young Israelis take these types of high-tech tools and then privatize them once they leave the army. Be it peacetime or war, Israeli innovations pop up throughout the world. Coming up next on Hello World, we'll check out an IDF-inspired startup that wants to send laboratories to space.
Why do people want to do experiments in space?
Every day our life is dominated by this lens of gravity. We remove that lens of gravity and we learn something new.
Los toros como negocio, espectáculo y cultura. Tiempo de toros. Con Rafael Cue, viernes, 9 de la noche. Retransmisión, sábado, 9 de la mañana. Porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
Forget dull strip malls and office parks. The startups of Tel Aviv come to life here in the city's vibrant neighborhoods. They feed off the city's energy, and the employees have a chance to escape their cubicles and live a little. I came here to meet one of the people that shaped the Israeli startup lifestyle. Shlomo Kramer served in the IDF almost 25 years ago, and his first company, Checkpoint, invented the freaking firewall.
We always had the startup bug, so we always talked about stuff that we will do afterwards, and it was always around startups.
Like a lot of Israel's tech elite, Shlomo got his start with Unit 8200, a top branch of the IDF.
Group 8200, right, is this famous part of the IDF that, I guess, equivalent to NSA in the United States.
It was like the bedrock of everything else that I've done afterwards. As a 22, 23-year-old, I was the head of a unit, of 20 people, very high responsibility. I was, making decisions in millions of dollars. And
the IDF functions sort of like a never-ending networking event. The first question at a cocktail party is what unit you served in. For members of Unit 8200, these ties have led to Israel dominating the market for security software and hardware.
What makes Israel so well-suited to startups and technology?
There's always an infusion of new talent from the IDF. And the infusion of talent, you've got the recipe for a successful startup nation.
Yeah.
Shlomo has invested in dozens of Israeli companies. To see the extreme end of what the IDF can inspire, I've gone to Herzliya, a small beach town and tech hub that brushes right up against Tel Aviv. It's here that a company called Space Pharma has set out to make some interstellar drugs.
If humanity would like to move out of Earth, they must learn the microgravity conditions in order to survive on the way to Mars and to other places. Florida is...
CEO Yossi Yamin used to head up the IDF satellite program. Then, he and his comrades hit on a big, possibly profitable idea. They assembled some space, software, and science experts and set to work trying to make life easier on astronauts.
We cut the middleman. The astronaut is not the scientist. He needs to survive, he needs to eat, he needs to train, he needs to sleep. He cannot do too much science.
Space Pharma has built a shoebox-sized laboratory that will hitch rides into orbit on rockets from companies like SpaceX. The goal is to shrink down state-of-the-art scientific equipment and automate how it runs experiments. This would allow a great deal more science to take place on the International Space Station.
So we're gonna go in the lab here.
Thank you for the booties.
You're very welcome. So it's a pretty small bio lab, but the equipment's big. And this you can't bring to space. So the whole idea of what we're trying to do and what we're really going to look at is how we take this equipment and bring it down to the small scale.
A typical laboratory has refrigerator-sized machines, microscopes, pipettes, and a host of liquids and chemicals. It's a very manual, messy process that's tough enough to pull off here on Earth.
We just looked at all that large equipment. This is what we fitted in.
Research done on the ISS has already led to the development of new drugs and insights about organisms. Molecules floating about freely in solutions can behave more naturally than when they're smeared flat on a petri dish.
Every day our life is dominated by this lens of gravity. What goes up must come down. We remove that lens of gravity and we learn something new.
Space Pharma wants to use its machines to let companies and researchers conduct dozens of different kinds of experiments, and to see what space can teach us. To pull myself out of the clouds and learn more about Israel's startup culture, I went for a walk on the beach back in Tel Aviv with another local tech legend.
Hello. Welcome to Israel.
Thank you very much. Thanks for Armed with a law degree and an MBA, Adi Sofer Teani had led a number of young companies and helped spur on Israel's technology economy. Now, she runs Facebook's Israel operations.
Today we have something like 5,300 startups in Israel. By the way, there's no one country in the world that has that amount of startups except the US.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
it's not even close.
And 1,400 new startups in 2015. 1,400 new startups.
Women must serve alongside men in the military here. Adi once hoped to fly jets, but because of the gender restrictions at the time, she ended up evaluating who could become a pilot. She sees the time in the Air Force as crucial to her career.
What's the uniqueness of the female experience in Israel because of the military service? It must have some long-term effects.
Yeah, I absolutely think it does. Women in Israel probably start their career life with more confidence, with the feeling that they also can. But are we done in Israel in terms of women taking part? No, we are not. And I think that in Israel we're probably, because of the military, because of Startup Nation, because of the culture, I think that we are probably closer to achieve that, but we are definitely still not there.
After our chat, Adi insisted that I go revel in Tel Aviv's famous nightlife. Tel Aviv stands out as one of the great surprises of my travels. People head out late here, often starting dinner at 9 p.m. The bartenders look for any excuse to do shots with their patrons, and their patrons, or at least this patron, look for any excuse to oblige. The beach, the old city, the boardwalk joyrides. This is a wondrous place that feels at times as if it exists within its own bubble, separate from the rest of the country. Next up, I travel to Jerusalem and visit a startup that puts a new twist on peering into the future.
Arranca la negociación del Tratado de Libre Comercio de América del Norte. ¿Cuáles son los objetivos? ¿Cuáles son los riesgos? Especial es el financiero NAFTA 2.0. Enrique Quintana y los más reconocidos expertos del país en el tema comercial dan sus opiniones.
La exigencia de parte de la administración norteamericana de endurecer las reglas de origen.
Hoy, 7:30 de la noche, porque reconoces lo importante, el Financiero Bloomberg.
From the cosmopolitan coast, I climbed the winding mountain road to Jerusalem. Tel Aviv may be the beating heart of the Israeli tech world, but most Jews consider Jerusalem to be the country's soul.
I'm Ashley.
And you know what they say about the soul.
If you think about it, the most basic thing of human communication is eye contact. By the device seeing you, you get a whole nother world of interaction.
The window to the soul.
Exactly, the window to the soul or the window to the brain. Look around, look to the right, look to the left.
Yitzi Kempinski is the co-founder and CEO of YouMove, based here in Jerusalem. The company has developed a way to replace eye tracking gear that usually costs tens of thousands of dollars with algorithms that can run on an iPad or smartphone.
It's a little disorienting at first to try and play a video game just by moving your head. So you see head movement, iris movement, blinks, and then
an analysis of that.
Kempinski hopes the technology will give us new, rapid insights into conditions like concussions.
So this is like when they shine the white light that you have to follow. I mean, you see doctors doing that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then based on the score, we can tell if I have a concussion and I don't.
You don't have one.
I don't have a concussion.
Kempinski thinks that these hard science applications with real-world uses distinguish Israel's tech scene, especially for Jerusalem startups.
People are looking for, real deep tech. You can't say, I'm, making an app for taking pictures of food. You have to give a real explanation to your Jewish grandmother about what is that for?
This is the Damascus Gate.
It's not that far at all from where we were earlier today. There's a sniper up in the window who's guarding against a lot of the recent stabbings that have been going on. Jerusalem's trying to turn into a technology city, and this is the reality of how these businesses have to come to life in this type of environment.
The moment you step into Jerusalem, it's clear that the city carries with it the weight of thousands of years of history. Everyone in the Middle East, and by extension the world, has their eyes fixed here, on Al-Aqsa Mosque, on the Wailing Wall, on the spot where it's believed Jesus was crucified. I traveled north, from Jerusalem to Nazareth, the largest Arab enclave in Israel, a place with a laid-back vibe and a very specific flavor.
We can see here 10 or 15 places just for shawarma. So because of that, I call it the Shawarma Valley.
Shawarma Valley.
You have the Silicon Valley, we have the Shawarma Valley, and we are at the middle of the Shawarma Valley.
That's Fadi Swidon. He opened Israel's first Arab tech accelerator, and he knows everyone in town.
كيف الحال؟ شو أخباركم؟
Arabs do not have to serve in the military and lack the tech connections supplied by the IDF. Fadi is set to work trying to fix this and to help Arab engineers benefit from Israel's tech boom. In a controversial move, he's linking them up with the tech moguls who have come out of the IDF's Unit 8200. The spooky security and espionage folks.
Anyone is going out of the 8200, first thing is thinking about is to make a startup. The 8200 graduates have a special NGO that helps them. At our community, it's not so popular to have startup because it's a new industry. It's very risky.
Fadi's a rebel. He was the only Arab in his class at the Technion, Israel's elite technical university. Inside of this building, he shepherded dozens of like-minded engineers. They're building software, consumer services, and hardware in an effort to make sure that the Arab-speaking world has the latest and greatest technology.
I think if we can be part of the ecosystem in Tel Aviv and to be part of the startup nation, we can raise the standard of life of the Arab community here.
Because Israel is known as this startup nation, but it's left out a big chunk of people so far.
Exactly. There's two communities, the Arabs and the Jewish Orthodox. The government now is putting some money to find the ways how to engage them with a startup nation here, because they believe that if we are not part of that, the startup nation will be somehow slowed here, and it cannot continue to be the second place after the Silicon Valley.
A handful of his companies have already taken off and made headway in billion-dollar industries, but it's proven tough for them to find investment dollars. There's a clear bias against Arab companies, and many of their backers have opted to remain anonymous or to funnel their investments through offshore accounts. But Fadi remains optimistic.
I hope in the coming years maybe we have big success stories, let's say. The first unicorn startup from the Arab community maybe here in Israel, so this maybe can attract more and more entrepreneurs to be part of that and attract Arab businessmen to be part of this industry.
On that hopeful note, my time in Israel came to an end. It's understandable that tourists have made fewer visits here in recent months, that the markets have grown quieter, and the mood in the streets more tense. This place can seem daunting from afar. To visit Israel, though, is to experience the extraordinary. So many parts of our nature, joy, conflict, conformity, and imagination swirl around together in confounding and inspiring ways. I'm not sure that anyone will really ever make sense of all this, but it's spectacular to witness and feel, even if just for a short while. As for my next stop, well, that would be Iceland, home of alien landscapes and a